Hello, and welcome to Let's Talk, a new series of candid conversations covering the issues facing freelance professionals today. I'm Tom Rizzo, your host, Managing Director and founder of Plectrum Advisors, an investment advisory firm based in Los Angeles. On each episode of Let's Talk, I'll be speaking with some of the most plugged-in experts to help you and me make sense of today's changing environment and to help you be smarter about how to approach work and life. So let's get started. Our guest is Stefanie Taub. Stefanie is the CEO of the AFM SAG-AFTRA Intellectual Property Fund. Many of our listeners are participants in this fund, and I thought it would be a great idea to speak with Stefanie about how the fund works and what it is and where the money comes from and what you can expect and those kinds of things. Welcome, Stefanie. Thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
And why don't we start, Stefanie, by you giving us a little bit of a background on the fund itself, what it does, and give us a little background on yourself, what your history is, and what it is that you do at the fund.
The AFM and SAG-AFTRA Intellectual Property Rights Distribution Fund, which is a mouthful, we're celebrating our 25th anniversary this year. I don't think people realize how long this fund has been around. It did start quite small, initially with, back at that time, there were Japanese record rental royalties. I don't know if anybody remembers back at the time that people in Japan could go and rent records, and there were royalties that were paid, and there was a deal that was made with the two unions to pay for the U.S. recordings and the U.S. performers. And that's kind of the very small beginnings of this fund. And shortly after that, the digital services started. And one thing that was very good is when the copyright laws were changed, the unions were very proactive and made sure that when there was a performance right created for some of these digital services, that there was provisions to get the artists paid and guaranteed payment. Not all featured artists are making a ton of money, but certainly the non-featured are not making a ton of money. And we wanted to make sure that when their recordings were exploited in these new services, that they were receiving a share of the royalties as well. So that's kind of how this fund started. It's contained in the copyright law that the services pay, and the services we're talking about here are what we call non-interactive services. So they're similar to radio, but in a digital format. For example, SiriusXM, online webcasters, anything where you're not picking what you're listening to. So it's just being aired like a radio station. And that's what these royalties represent. And it's specified that the services pay that money and it goes into SoundExchange. And what SoundExchange does is they pay 50% of that money to the copyright holder, which in general is the record label. But often if you're self-released, you as an artist, you get that 50% share. And then 45% goes to the featured artists on the recording. And that's distributed by SoundExchange. And then 5% is now sent to the fund for the non-featured artists. And that's split, again, this was set in the copyright law. That is actually 2.5% for the non-featured instrumentalists and then 2.5% for the non-featured vocalists. So that's how that 5% is apportioned. It was really up to the unions how they decided to set up an organization to distribute this money. They could have each set up a separate one. But at the time, they felt it would be more cost effective to have one organization that would distribute this on behalf of both singers and instrumentalists. And so they combined forces, which is really quite unique. There aren't really many unions that have combined. Otherwise, each one would have had to been paying for a separate entity to be doing this job. And the other thing to remember, though, even though the unions were very instrumental in creating this and getting this right and making sure this money was going to the non-featured artists, because it is something that's coming out of the federal copyright law, the requirement is that we distribute to all performers on a recording without regard to union affiliation. So a lot of what we do is really trying to promote ourselves out in the music world so that other folks who may not be connected to the unions are aware that we have this income stream for that. I came to the fund originally in around 2012. I became a board member on the fund. At the time I was working at AFTRA, and which then merged with SAG and became SAG-AFTRA. And I've always worked on the music side of working for singers. I was between the two, AFTRA and SAG-AFTRA, for over 20 years. And when the position became available here, I felt that I had a lot of background in this area, and I was very well versed with the fund.
We're thrilled that you're in this position. This is not a simple mechanism here. This is a lot of moving parts. Give me a little bit of an idea of how, in dollars, how much is collected, how much is distributed, and how it's grown, and what the projections are for the future on this kind of thing.
So at the initial stages of the fund, the first few years, around maybe $100,000 came in a year. Now the last few years now, I would say we're up to, just domestically in the US, we collect approximately $50 million every year. So we've distributed over the lifetime of the fund over $600 million to non-featured artists. That 50 million is just domestic royalties. One of the things I didn't talk about yet is we also have agreements with many organizations in other countries to collect on behalf of US performers. So we go out and make agreements with different territories where they collect. For example, let's say Germany, they collect for different rights in their country, and they play a lot of US music there, and they collect on behalf of US artists. So that is actually one area where union membership is important, because in order to collect internationally, a performer has to give someone their mandate to collect those royalties. So in the union membership agreements, and part of the union bylaws is that you're assigning that to the union. So what happens is the union then basically made us an administrator of those rights. And so we go out, since we already have the information about the performers and who's on which recording, then we go out to these other, they're called CMOs, collective management organizations, in other countries, and we tell them, hey, we represent all these people, these are the recordings they're on, give us their money that you've collected, and we will then send that out to them as well. We actually just had our large distribution, which we normally do at the end of every April this year. And that one actually, because we did really well in the international side this year, we just distributed almost $90 million this time around.
Tell me a little bit about the distribution schedule. How often do checks go out, and how is that determined?
We do our main distribution at the end of April of every year. If someone comes forward in the middle of the year, for example, sometimes we don't have a good address on them, or they hadn't registered with us, but we'll hold the money if we've identified that they're on recordings. Quarterly, we do sort of little catch-up distributions for those folks. We also do in the end of September what we call our audio-visual distribution. That's connected also to the international royalties, where in several countries, the main ones being Germany and Spain, there are royalties available there for audio in audiovisual works. So what that means is, in film and television, if you're either on the underscore to that material or on a record that was used in a film or TV show, we collect those monies as well. and we distribute that at the end of September. So that's a much smaller distribution, but that's done it later on in the year. Our goal is to increase the frequency of those distributions. Right now, we're actually in the middle of a modernization project on our internal systems, which will allow us to pay more often. So, you know, the goal, hopefully we can get to quarterly. I know it's you know, much easier than having to wait the whole year to get your payment. Right now, we're just sort of constrained by technology, but we should have that going in the next year or so, up and running, and hopefully we'll be able to do that. The other thing that will enable us to do distributions more frequently is if people are signed up for direct deposit. That's much easier and quicker, and it actually saves money that we don't have to do the mail and printing and all of that kind of stuff.
You mentioned that the recipients are non-featured performers. If there are listeners out there that feel that they may be one of these people that has made recordings as a non-featured artist, but that they're not sure whether they are either in your database or lined up, or that you have the correct information for them, what would you recommend that those people do in order to maximize any benefit they might have in terms of contacting you and that kind of thing?
The best thing to do is to start with our website, which is www.afmsagaftrafund.org. And we have a couple different things you can look at. One is we have an unclaimed performer list. So those are folks that we've identified as having money available, meaning they're on a recording that's earned some royalties somewhere, but we can't locate them for various reasons. And often that's either they've been signed up previously and we don't have current contact information, or they never registered, so we don't have that information. The other thing that's very common on our unclaimed list, and we'd really love to get the word out on this, is beneficiaries. So you might see some, you know, relatively well-known names who have passed away, and you're like, how do you not know where to find those folks? But we need someone's either will or trust or whatever legal documentation showing who their legal beneficiaries are, and then we can pay out that money. So it's been difficult. You know, there's no source you can go to and say, hey, who's this person's beneficiaries? So we really want to make sure people are aware to let who their potential beneficiaries may be, let them know about the fund and that we're here and that we're one of the places they need to go to at that time to make sure that that money continues to flow to them, because we do pay beneficiaries, you know, as long as there's money there, we will pay it out to the beneficiaries.
Do you recommend that people who are participants, is there a mechanism for them to declare who their beneficiaries will be and to sign up in that kind of situation?
We're working on some thoughts about how to at least have contact information. So if we do see someone, we can, you know, at least reach out to them at that time. The other section on our website that is key to that is we also have a list of recordings that we currently have money attributed to. So you can go search any of the recordings in your repertoire and see if we have you on that recording. And if we don't, you can file an omissions claim.
I see.
Normally we require some sort of documentation to go along with that, but we try to cast a wide net because we know it's difficult, particularly if it's an older recording that, you know, people didn't save the documentation from back then. So I just want to reinforce how important it is, even now going forward, to keep records. You know, back in the day, people didn't know that there was going to be this continuing income stream,
right,
and how important this documentation was going to become, because it didn't exist. So, you know, now, even if you just keep a running list of every session you do, that's so helpful for us.
Just to reiterate, on the website, there is a list of all recordings that you have received royalties from, so somebody could go and look and see,
Yes.
oh, I'm on this recording. and then they could check in with you if they feel that they have not been credited for it. That's the beginning of that process.
Yes, and they can also register and create an account on our website as well. And that's how they'll be able to access who we have listed on the recordings, is they'll create an account and they register with us, and then they can see the full list.
And so this would be the mechanism, let's say for a current recipient, fund recipient, someone who's receiving checks on a regular basis, but may not have information or knowledge about, am I getting everything I'm due or everything that I've recorded? Their mechanism would be to go to the website, and they could create an account or add to their account.
Yes, and not only will they be able to search through that complete list of recordings, but when they create an account online, they'll be able to access their own statements that show exactly what they've been paid for. So they can run through that, and if there's any, they might see, hey, I'm on this big popular song and it's not listed on my statement. Let me go look and see if the fund has me credited on that recording.
Let's say that would be a situation where someone would find, well, there's a recording that's collected money. I don't know whether I'm receiving money for that. What kind of documentation would they have to supply you with in order to get themselves added to that revenue stream?
We get that question a lot, and I hesitate to give a fixed list. We have examples of things. One of the best things is a union member report, or if you have credits on the released recording. Those are the easy ones. If you have a check stub that has the song title on it, you could even have an email of someone hiring you for that session. Let's say we have 3 of the musicians listed and we're just missing the 4th. If the other 3 say, hey, we know that this is the 4th person on this, and we're verifying that this is the other person on this track, we'll take that as well.
What can we expect with the changes in the business, with streaming and that kind of thing? How might that affect the future royalty payments and that kind of thing?
For now, at least in the domestic area, there was significant growth for quite some time. We also keep an eye on, in case we see the numbers going the other way. I will say for at least 5+ years, we've seen the domestic really stay steady in that approximately $50 million range. Haven't seen anything to lead us to believe that's going to change in the near future, but you never know where the business is going to go. We've seen, the music business has had so much change over the last 20 years. Yeah. Really, the growth area for us is in international. We've been really working hard to make sure that we have agreements with different territories, to make sure that the real important part is that we have good data domestically, and that makes it much easier for us to collect internationally. And the other thing is we're very active on the legal side as well. We have currently a couple of active cases with one in France and one in the UK, just advocating. I won't get into the very complicated details, but advocating for collections for US performers. And that's something that we always try to keep it at the head of, to make sure that we're collecting, again, as much as possible.
I want to just kind of circle back to remind listeners that if you are a recording artist, a non-featured recording artist, instrumentalist, go to the website and take a look at what's going on there. It's quite possible that there are resources available to you that you're not currently taking advantage of.
One of the roadblocks we run into often, which is understandable, is we reach out to folks and we say, hey, we have money for you. Can you give us all of this really personal information on you so we can pay you? And they're like, are you calling from Nigeria? If they're not familiar with the fund, or they don't really know what we do, there's a real hesitance to give us their information and to register with us.
You got to make sure that you're making the right choice in terms of protecting your privacy and not giving up some benefits that are there for you.
Exactly.
We're going to encourage everybody to go to the website, see if you're listed there, create an account for yourself. And we feel that this will be in everybody's best interest to be able to avail themselves of the funds that could be there for you, that good people like Stefanie and her staff are working so diligently to collect and to distribute to you. So thanks, Stefanie. This has really been great to get a deeper understanding of this. Feel free to reach out to either me. We'll put our website up also as well, if we can help you navigate this. Stefanie, we appreciate it so much, and we look forward to our next conversation.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure.
Well, that's it for today's broadcast with Stefanie Taub, the CEO of the AFM SAG-AFTRA Intellectual Property Fund. Thanks again for watching. We hope you'll come back for more. We've got some great guests lined up, and we'll be sure to let you know when the episodes are available. Thanks again for watching.